Enlisted on console might feel a bit spongy and clunky at the beginning, but there are a few settings that you can change to improve the controls and your gameplay experience. You can find the settings in the top right corner of the main menu or by holding the menu button of your controller during battle. They are split in options and controls, and I'm gonna start with the options. At the graphics tab, you can change quality and save area. Quality is set at high by default, but you can also set it to high performance, which is similar to PC where you lower the graphics to have higher FPS. On console, however, I would keep it on high quality if you don't have any performance issues. If you do have issues, especially on Xbox Series S, try the high performance setting. The save area is the free area around the HUD elements. Set to 100, your HUD elements will stick to the edges of the screen. When you lower it, the HUD elements will be placed further away from the edges. On the second tab, I reduced the sound effects a little bit as I felt that it was a bit too loud compared with the other sounds, especially the gunfire. But that's personal preference and also depends a lot on your headphones or speakers. On the game tab, you can set field of view and camera shake, enable or disable blood and gore, and change the settings for crossplay. The FOV is personal preference. The default value is 90 and I stick to this because that's the FOV I'm also using in other shooter games. With a high FOV, you see more of your surroundings, but targets on range appear smaller and might be harder to spot and to hit. With a lower FOV, you see less of your surroundings and the weapon covers more of your screen, but targets on range also appear bigger and are easier to spot and hit. So if you have problems with spotting and hitting targets on range, experiment with the FOV until you find the value that fits your playstyle. Camera shake means how much your screen is shaking from nearby explosions. I set it to 0 to reduce the shake as much as possible. Blood and gore enables or disables the visual effects for this. I would recommend to have both enabled, as blood on the floor or walls is always a good hint that there might be enemies nearby. Crossplay can be chosen between off, consoles only or all. I'm using consoles only as I don't want to be cannon fodder for PC players, and there's also enough players on both consoles, so there's no need to fully enable it, unless you want to play with friends on PC. Note that the crossplay option is only shown if you enter the options in the main menu. During battle, this option won't be available. At controls, you have a lot more options to customize, and I didn't change much over here, but a few things that make the game and social movement feel less spongy and clunky. On the main tab, you can find all the sensitivity and dead zone settings. If you are used to play inverted, you can enable it here. Aiming speed depends on your personal preference. If you're not experienced in playing shooter games, I would recommend to start with the default value, and if it feels too slow or fast, set it higher or lower but in small steps. Sensitivity multiplier is the sensitivity you will have when aimed down sight. If you set it to 1, your aiming sensitivity and the aiming speed will be the same. I would recommend to try out what fits best for you. The default value is set pretty low, so I set it to 0.8 instead. That means my aiming sensitivity is 80% of my aiming speed. So turning and moving is faster and aiming is a bit slower. Third person, first person, vehicle and plane multiplier is set to 1, so it uses the same speed as the aiming speed. Left and right stick dead zone describes how much you have to move the stick until the game recognizes an input and your soldier starts to move or aim. Set to a very high value, it feels like a massive input lag as you move the control stick but there's nothing happening. Set to 0, your soldier will start to move or turn without even touching the stick. So something between 5 and 10 should be fine depending on the quality of your controller and your personal preference. Aim assist should be turned on unless you want a real hardcore experience. Vibration in UI is enabled by default, but I would recommend to turn it off as it can be pretty annoying when you use the pie menu and every option comes with a controller feedback. Vibration in battle is personal preference. Some players like to have a feedback, others don't. So if you don't like controller vibration when shooting or because of explosions, turn it off. The next point is aim acceleration, and that's also what makes the controls feel so weird on console. Set to the default value, your soldier is turning much slower when you only move the stick a little bit, but is turning much faster the more you push the stick to the edges. Displayed as a graph, it would look like an exponential graph. That makes the aim and the whole soldier movement feel spongy and clunky. I would highly recommend to set it to 0. This will make your aim more precise and the whole movement completely different and much more natural. Without the acceleration, the turning speed is still lower on low stick movement and higher with more stick movement, but the graph is linear now. At the movement tab, I sticked with the default settings. On the weapons tab, I set hold breath to the left trigger, which is the button I also use to aim down sight. That means my soldier holds breath in the moment he's aiming down sights, and I won't have to push an additional button. Try and see if it fits your playstyle and if it even works for you. For me it works fine, and I use it on every other shooter as well. Note that the hold breath mechanic has a cooldown, so you can't aim down sight forever without breathing, and it also takes a moment until your soldier is holding its breath again after cancelling the ADS. On all other tabs, I'm still using the default settings. If you want to change some of the button mappings, you also have a lot of different options to customize the controls. For example, on hold, double or triple tap, on release, and so on. So if you don't like any of the default settings, you can fully customize every action of your soldier. And that's it for today. I hope this guide helps you to find the right console and controller settings in Enlisted. If it did, be sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel to stay tuned. Until then, thanks for watching, I am the Catwoman and you are awesome.